I'm the soul of a 40-year-old with the energy of a 20-year-old. And that's really what I feel, given that, as a strategist, I've been an observer of culture, pop culture, and of people and of behavior. And then there was always this moment that we realized was the truth across every woman that we spoke to, which was she had a mirror moment. Any important occasion, whether I'm going to meet my boyfriend or my friends in a cafe, or if I'm stepping into a meeting, or any context, right? Even if I'm going to a social situation, I'm going to a party, there's a mirror moment that happens just before I enter the scene, so to speak, right? So I will groom myself, ground myself, calm myself, whatever that is, right? So I think that's where we found an opportunity out there. There was a classic space for that product where there was a need. There was nothing in that particular space.
As per your wife, your most often used phrase?
Please. The second one is sorry. Or maybe in the reverse order.
Welcome to the next episode of Jagged with Jasravi, conversations at the edge with thought leaders from the marketing, branding, and the business world. Conversations that ignite new ideas with sharp, rough edges. Hi, Anirudh. So nice to have you on my show.
Thank you, Jasravi. I'm really, really happy to be here. I'm in a good place right now, emotionally and physically. So I'm really looking forward to this chat.
Good. So you've worked with so many brands and businesses, and Asian Paints is one of the brands and companies that is, one of the times there was a program where they said one of the brands that built India, and Asian Paints was one of them. So could you talk about, I was going down the memory lane, Anirudh, and this ad of Har Ghar Kuch Kehta Hai, in the fact that it was leveraging a trend. It was so much ahead of its time. There came a point in time when every home decors, and every home space, home trends would capture this as one of the trends, like home is an expression of you. But when this ad came and the way it, took up that expression, it was so much ahead of its time. And the more I read about the company, I felt this is just one area where they've been ahead of time. Whatever, whether it's a relationship with dealers, technology, every part of ecosystem that they built, it was ahead of its time. So could you share what do you think have been some key success factors for the company? And then, we talk about some campaigns that you've been closely associated with.
The brand in itself has been a milestone in Indian culture because I think very few times, where brands, and I think those are the brands that really stand out as leader brands, when brands are not selfish about their business and they think slightly outside the box. When I say outside the box, it is the job of, and it's the heavy lifting of teaching people what your category really means to them, right? And I think that's one of the things that Asian Paints did. Because for the longest time, people in India used to look at exteriors, any kind of coating, and paints came a little later on. But initially, people just had bricks and cement, and sem paint was dominant for the longest time. And the concept of paint in itself was a big deal for Indians. And it could have either been a very, very functional sort of a way of looking at your own business and saying that, Akhir main ek paint company hu, and I'm going to be hard selling my product, and that's what I do best, which they don't shy away from at all. But somehow there is also this vision and this great belief that I am making a difference and I will make a difference to people and their lives. And I think that's what they did. They ended up creating a currency out of themselves so far as culture is concerned. And I think it's a very interesting chicken and egg situation, if you ask me. Brands are often looking to consumers for inspiration. And I think consumers are often looking to brands for inspiration as well. And although that is, one would say it's more true in the recent years where none of the technology interventions that have happened in our lives and none of the new age brands that have become foundational to our lives would have happened if they would have said, let me see what the consumer need really is like, right? So they just owned up what the consumer was going through, and they believed in the solution and they created it. And I think that, especially in the time that Asian Paints was really had begun operating, uh, that ahead of its curve, to say that, you know what, I am going to make a difference, to take up that ownership and say, this is an important category in your life because, right? And whether it is Har Ghar Kuch Kehta Hai, Jisme Kaun Rehta Hai, and it's one of those big stories that sort of covered the entire category in this beautiful emotional sort of narrative, right? And in my journeys with Asian Paints, which was 5 years, I think there was a lot of different kinds of individuals I met. Uh, and surprisingly so, even after I stopped working on the brand, I still met people whose lives had been touched in some way, and the company had been a part of their success stories in some way. And that actually tells you how authentic the entire system is to deliver success to its own business and to everybody else, whether it's value delivering to the customer, which means that I will constantly give you better quality paints, which will add to either the decor element of the house or the functionality of the house. And both of them are important to the paint consumer today. Or this to the painter saying that, you know what, I am going to train you, and I'm going to help you adopt new ways of doing things and newer ideas so you can upgrade your position in society as a painter and at the same time, increase your livelihood opportunities, right? Or it is to the dealers where, they get a chance to stop being just salesmen and have the opportunity to advise and consult people, right? And that also adds a lot of value back to the dealership. So I think at multiple levels, they've been able to sort of create a very clear narrative of success. Yes, Har Ghar Kuch Kehta Hai, Jisme Kaun Rehta Hai, I think is the magnum opus, one of the magnum opus, if I were to put it like that, in Asian Paints. But I think starting with what they did for exteriors as a category, making it slightly more humorous, giving it a layer of culture, carving out certain personality types, right? India started identifying themselves with Suresh Babu, etc., right? There were these milestone characters that Asian Paints created, which were really somewhere so true to India, but Asian Paints has sort of put it up there and celebrated them in a very, very different way. So there has been a layer upon layer, or whether it is the interiors as a category, recognizing the role of a woman, and also evolving yourself and your business agenda and your brand agenda with the changing roles in society. Asian Paints is maybe 30, 35 years in the business, maybe a little longer. As a brand, it's been around for 20, 25 years for sure. And in those 25 years, there's a lot that has changed in Indian mainstream as well, right? And you can see that in the quality of the products, in the quality and the kind of advertising, in the kind of people that they associate with. Some of their collaborations, I would say, are far more new age than any of the FMCG companies, right? And when I say collaborations, they're content collaborations, creating platforms for architects and interior designers. So, like I would say, I mean, there has been a completely plugged in view of culture, which is rich, but it's not static.
Yeah,
So this is this is the 35,000 feet of, what I think has led to the success of the company.
35,000 feet. Okay, I'm going to focus on the 10 feet of brand building there. Tell me, Anirudh, how is it that, what are the processes? What is it that they get it right when it comes to communication? Apart from the partnership with Ogilvy, how is it that, add up? Because even the Suresh Babu you mentioned, Badhiya hai, Naya Ghar, Nayi Gaadi and all that. So it just touches you, it moves you. It's so real, it's so Indian. And like you said, it's so authentic and it moves you, it connects with you, it grows in your heart. So when they are looking at culture, when they're capturing, even for content engagement, you really have to be present in the now. And like you said, ears completely tuned into what's going on in the consciousness around. So how do they get it right every time? Are there any processes? Are something specifically different they are doing? The kind of people they hire, the culture they have? Could you share on those aspects?
Yeah. I think fundamentally, like I said, I mean, ears to the ground in a very, very authentic way, right? I'm saying a lot of people say ears to the ground, but it becomes almost like a thing that you talk about, right? A lot of times. In the case of Asian Paints, I think it begins with how they see the consumer, and the best way to sort of understand is to understand how a company looks at its segmentation. In fact, a lot of people would be surprised to know that a lot of mainstream brands don't even have a very clear view of segmentation. It's almost like guided by intuition in so many ways, right? And although Asian Paints does come across as that, it's very, very scientific in nature. And let me just give you an example of how they look at their customers, the lens at which they operate it from. And that makes it easier for you to also, therefore, subsequently touch upon the kind of conversations that you want to have with your audiences, right? So one is how you see yourself as a company, right? There was a time when Asian Paints was a paints company. And a lot of people on the outside still look at it as that, right? But Asian Paints internally has been going through a huge journey where they don't refer to other paint brands as their competitors. What they really talk about is the kind of level playing field that they want to be on. Is we talk like brands like IKEA, which are decor brands, right? So that in itself tells you what your aspiration is and how you're defining your consumer, therefore. So there was a time when there was a segmentation which was created for a paint specific business, right? And even the kind of names that would be thrown around. For example, there was a very, very popular segment called Rangilas. And Rangilas are people, who are newly moneyed mostly, and they, for them, the easiest expression is spending of money to tell the people that I have arrived, whether it's a brand new car or it's a big car or whether it's a home being painted freshly. So I think all these were, sort of ways and lenses from which, you would look at the consumer. And there were audiences and definitions like these, which would then exactly tell you who you're talking to. But also the beauty about it was every audience had a product or a service targeted at it specifically. So it wasn't just a way of sort of culturally identifying what the segments were. It was also, making it relevant to business. And therefore, what really happened was, when you said Rangila, everybody from the marketing head to the man on the street, and I've worked with a lot of feet on the street for Asian Paints. They're very clear about who they're talking about. When they say Rangila, they would know who they're talking about, right? So there is fundamental unity in understanding about, who's my customer, what is the USP of my product, right? And when that is broadcasted in a Suresh Babu Naya Ghar Nahi Gaadi Nahi Mrs. Badhiya Hai, okay, that's the cultural expression of the Rangila segment that I'm talking about. Okay, you don't need to explain it to anybody else, right? And therefore, this is the guy who wants only the best. So your dealer will tell you, boss, ye sabse best paint hai. If the customer has to come in, a Rangila sort of a customer has to walk into a store, or if he has to even brief his painter or interior designer, he'll say, boss, mere ko sabse best paint chahiye. Okay. And that is a sort of world that automatically, organically populates itself, right? And it all starts with a clarity in how you look at your target audience, right? And somewhere down the line, I think, of course, business was growing and there were growing aspirations, right? And at some point, Asian Paints stopped seeing itself as just a pure play paints company. Yes, that's my core business, but that's not just who I am, right? So they started looking at themselves as more of a decor company. And if you track the journey that the company has had, there's also a lot of capability building at the back end that has happened, right? Whether it is through collaborations or acquisitions, or even creating new disciplines within the company, newer services, newer products, newer technologies, new deliveries to consumers, right? So whether it's about creating a technology interface at a store to deliver a particular benefit to the consumer. And that's where it all sort of starts coming together. So when it started seeing itself as a decor company, one of the first things that happened was we were introduced to a completely new segmentation, which was the decor segmentation. And in that, the simple lens was that India today is extremely decor sensitive. And when I say decor sensitive, it's one of the key ingredients of how we make and see our homes, how we see and make our homes rather, and how culturally over time, various segments have evolved out of this single sort of, I would say, a broader platform of decor. So, for example, there were these modern traditionals who are middle class people like me and most people in India, who have grown up in traditional families. Have not really traveled the world, and therefore, lived within our means. And our exposure, therefore, to ideas and decor is things that we see from our visits to certain places.
Mm,
Mahabaleshwar gaya, wahan pe kuch acha lag gaya. I went
mm,
down south, I liked some piece of art, right?
mm,
And I picked that up. And somehow all these collections of ours find a way. Or mere bete ne koi gold medal jeet liya race ke andar, to maine ek trophy ka showcase bana diya, right? So it's our personal experiences that become a way of aggregating the decor of our house, right?
mm, mm,
And that's really one segment. And I'm just giving you an example. And the Rangila has sort of turned into a very modern day sort of first generation rich, as you call it,
mm,
and lots of these businesses. And if you were to look at the profile of this person, this could be a person who's not even past 10 standard, whose father was a teacher or maybe even
mm,
was employed with the railways.
mm,
Okay. And बाकी के भाई बहनों ने सबने पढ़ाई की, and he or she always saw themselves as a black sheep in the family.
mm,
And they always wanted to break out of the mold. And they said,
mm,
नहीं, मैं टैक्सी चलाऊंगा. Okay.
mm,
मैंने
mm,
एक टैक्सी चलाई, उससे दो लगाई, उससे आज मेरे पास 25 टैक्सी है. Okay. And now I have so much to prove wrong to my
mm,
family, especially, and to the world, right?
mm. So, like you said, Asian Paints is looking at all these trends and ensuring, products come in for every kind of an emerging segment or an expression of it. So, Anirudh, would you like to talk about any campaign uh, that is close to your heart? So, could you share
So
a proposition that you guys cracked, which gave you a bit of a delta?
So it was waterproofing, okay, and it was always led by waterproofing. But the one thing that we really sort of brought in was there was something called Recron fibers, okay, and Recron fibers were these small little things, that would add more sort of how do I say, more protection against the rainwater trickling in, and that was
Hmm.
simply what it was. And what we told, I mean, the story that was told in the market was, these are fibers which bridge the small little gaps in your walls which you can't even see, right? And if you ask a Kerala consumer, he knows that there are no big gaping holes in my walls. It's
Hmm.
because of the porosity of the wall
Hmm.
that the water tends to trickle in over time,
Ah,
right?
okay.
And therefore those fibers did the trick, and they were also visual in nature. So when we showed them to people, people said, there is something definitely in here, right? So
Hmm.
I was a very, very beautiful sort of a sweet spot that we found to position that product, and it gave us great results as well. So
Yeah, yeah.
in
It's
terms of
extra
equity and in terms
protection.
of business.
And
Yes,
relevance.
yes.
Yeah, yeah. And high relevance. Yeah. Okay. So, fine. So let's go to brand Livon now. Similar kind of a, the brand has again created a lot of value, but when it came, all of us were like, what is it? Where do I place it in my hair care, and do I really need to place it, or is it optional? And from whatever we remember, it had to really reinvent itself quite a lot of times to get it right, because it was a completely new to the market category. And it had the tough task of changing a habit, having a different kind, developing a hair care regime, and having a format that's familiar but a benefit that's not already being given. Quite a lot of classic challenges. So why don't you share with us your partnership with that brand, and any historic moments that you witnessed in it trying to get it right?
It was a very interesting case, honestly, because Livon everybody had heard of, but people just didn't know what it was doing in the marketplace for the
Hmm.
longest time. I think it was one of those categories that consumers and cultures tend to skip over for some reason. I mean, uh, maybe credit cards in India would be possibly the closest example that I can think of, right? Where they became cool and they were there, and then people just said, "Oh, move on. Credit cards is not our way of doing things." Then
Hmm.
came Paytm, so now fintech is the new way of doing things, right? And somehow, that's just how it is. People find usage limited relevance for a particular category. I think Livon possibly suffered from that. A great product, but somehow maybe the story just didn't reach out to consumers. Uh, And for the longest time, it also saw itself in a certain way. So it was a product which was a wet area usage kind of product. So just for everyone's benefit, Livon is a serum. Okay, it's a styling serum. So hair setting and styling serum. And usually, how you would apply it is uh, whenever women have a head bath. Okay, you allow the hair to dry up a bit, and just before it goes completely dry, you use the serum to sort of style it. Right. So that was how it was supposed to be. And therefore, it was usually combined with use in the bathroom and just outside of it, sort of thing, just immediately post shower kind of a ritual. And somehow it just found limited resonance with consumers and therefore a very finite sort of business footprint. And of course, there was enough investment that was made by Marico into the brand for it to continue believing that maybe there is still some stone that can be turned differently for us to unlock some potential in this brand. And that's when I think it came to Ogilvy. Everybody was in a very, very open space of mind to see how do we unravel this story. Here's this Abhishek Bachchan, if I were to just call it that, of a brand, right? It has tremendous potential, but somehow just hasn't sort of delivered to the potential. And I think at that point in time, there was a lot of conversations that we were having, right? And you were talking about an older brand to a younger audience. You couldn't have possibly gone back to the age-old formula and spoken to the older woman because you had to really re-energize the brand and look at it from a very different lens altogether. So we said, let's talk to the younger woman and see how can she place this brand, because she's less likely to have any baggage about this particular product. Because a 35-year-old has possibly seen Livon and glossed over it. Now, how do I recreate value for it? It's going to be a slightly more layered task. But if I were to go to a younger consumer and see if I can fit into their life in a certain way, they don't have baggage. Might be an easier way out there. And that's where the strategic approach really was. And when we went in, of course, rounds of conversations, and somewhere we realized that maybe there was an opportunity, okay, in how the younger woman's life was shaping up today. There was an opportunity in sort of changing the framing for this product. I mean, I say that, not just that it become post-shower, post-wash, ritual, but can this become on the go, accessible anywhere kind of a hairstyling ritual, right? And you club that with the reality of the modern day Indian young woman, right? It could be a college-going girl, it could be a first job, or anybody. I'm saying typical ways of defining, right? Very mobile lifestyles. Hair is exposed to a lot. They're also aware that they're trying out a lot more with their hair overall. There's usage of colors, etc., etc. There's this experimentation that is happening at one end. And then there's also the consciousness of hey, what's happening to my hair, right? And I need to find ways and means to sort of create solutions which are practical and also things that give me an edge in a social context, right? So if you look at her life, I mean, she's always out and about, whether it's a college-going girl, you're riding scooters, traveling trains, rickshaws, whatever you have, right? And that has an impact on hair, simply put, right? So if we call it helmet hair or whatever, typically what happens, frizz happens, right? When you expose hair with dust and moisture and humidity, especially if you're in a city like Bombay. So different things playing up, right? And then there was always this moment that we realized was the truth across every woman that we spoke to, which was she had a mirror moment. Any important occasion, whether I'm going to meet my boyfriend or my friends in a cafe, or if I'm stepping into a meeting, or any context, right? Even if I'm going to a social situation, I'm going to a party, there's a mirror moment that happens just before I enter the scene, so to speak, right? So I will groom myself, ground myself, calm myself, whatever that is, right? And that involves a mirror moment, and it's usually in a bathroom, sort of in a restroom and a public restroom sort of space, right? So I think that's where we found an opportunity out there. There was a classic space for that product where there was a need. There was nothing in that particular space. There was water that was already there because she was in that space like that, right? And then there was a moment of truth for us, so far as building the product positioning was concerned. And that's what we did. And we said, this is your, anytime, anywhere styling agent. And suddenly, the younger women started seeing it very differently, and it was nice and convenient. It became very popular all of a sudden, and somehow we felt that it was just probably too early of its time when it was in the Indian market. Maybe it needed a sort of a market like this for it to really come into its own, and that's what really worked. So what we were looking at targets for 3 years in terms of business, we got them in the first year. And I think from a brand that had enough potential within the Marico system, I think it was pegged as one of the youth centric future facing brands that would be invested in. And from there on, I think subsequently, layer upon layer, we just realized that success creates a lot of ideas that breed more success, sort of thing. And so we
shows
said, hey,
the
listen,
direction.
Yes.
Yeah.
So why take away the need for a bathroom? I mean, why not give them a dual sort of a dispensing bottle where one side is serum, the other side is some water, some hydrating agent, right? Today, in India, there's different kinds of hair, right? There is curly hair, some other kinds of hair, thin hair, etc., etc. And how can we then nuance the solution further to build further, relevance for the product? And it just sort of started building off the back of this new trajectory or new journey that the brand had started off on. And very gratifying, honestly, because everybody walks in thinking, let's see what can be done with this. Practically everything has been tried until then. And sometimes, a little bit of fresh, thinking in itself can really make a big difference between what can look like success and otherwise.
I think, Anirudh, getting the role in life right was also a big thing, and who it is for. Because, when it came, styling products were not really looked at with that kind of acceptance. I mean, so many styling products had come and not worked. Lakme styling range, entire range had not worked, so to look at it as something that is part of my lifestyle, did it have any do good elements also? Because the styling part is very short term gratification, and most women, if they can help it, they would be rather that I adopt products that are good for me in the long run as well. So using it for just that moment, little bit as a necessity, it kind of justifies itself. I'm going to make an appearance, and my hair is, this thing, and obviously needs something, and just a little bit is need of the time. But did it have any do good element also, something that will not harm or whatever? Because
see, I mean, not an overt story, right, at that point in time, but it's. I mean, fundamentally, what it did was, and I remember these conversations when I stopped working on the brand, so I'm not really in touch with what's in the market right now.
Sure.
But I wouldn't be surprised if there is an element of that with some aloe or something like that, which will then come in and definitely create that, the other side of value, which is not just looks, but also nutrition. And you're right about that. I remember in my conversations on various brands across the portfolio, I've done some work on Parachute as well afterwards. Women and younger girls especially, I think I look at it as the comeback of oiling, right? And a lot of doomsday predictions about the category, kya hoga aage jaake, right? And somewhere you come to a point where, like COVID has, for example, turned people back to immunity and Ayurveda and natural and all of that, right? Suddenly you find, more value in basics, right? I think oiling is also going through a similar process, because there is one extreme of hair going through so many different things, exposure to not just the elements in the air outside, more pollution, and people are more conscious of this, right? This data is getting fed into them on a daily basis. There's more pollution, there is more dust, blah blah blah, right? And then there is, combine that with experimentation, coloring, this, that, and all new kinds of hairstyling equipment that come along. And now you see younger women, right? And this is across all kinds of demographics. I'm not just talking big metros, but also smaller towns and cities. Younger women are saying, you know what? my mother asks me to oil my hair now, I don't fight back. Okay, I do it twice or thrice a week. पहले मैं मना कर देती थी because I thought it was just uncool, but now I know it's just necessary, it's needed. So I don't fight it at all. मैं कर लेती हूँ, right? So I think definitely there will be that potential automatically. I'm not sure if it's already in the market. It could already be in the marketplace, but yeah.
Sure. So since you've worked on these categories, Anirudh, would you like to share any emerging trends or any insights of consumer segments that you feel a lot of affinity for? And I'd let you mention the segments that you want to talk about.
Okay. No, I think there is a lot of, in my head, it takes time for me to even parse out what these last 2 or 3 generations are, right? And there were these baby boomers, and then I know for a fact that I am Generation X. But after that, I was in a big conflict because I thought I wanted to be a millennial, but I missed being a millennial by a year, right? So that was my personal grouse. But apart from that, I think after the 80s, I've been very intense, right? And I'm reading this book, and it talks about change, right? And the most insightful part about this book is that more often than not, we focus on the change, right? But what this author really says is you need to focus on the speed at which this change happens. And he says it's the speed that actually is a cause of all the after effects that you see in society, whether what you see in the US, right? And it almost feels like it's reverting back to fascism. It's actually years and years, and at least in the last couple of decades, of the change that has been imposed on a certain kind of a society, that it is now hitting back and rebelling, right? Whether it is MAGA crowd or whether it is Proud Boys, whatever you call them, those movements, right? Which people are now quoting Nazism and Hitler in so many ways, right? It's so loosely spoken of, right? It's a result of the continuous and constant and speedy change that has happened over time, right? And I feel 80s onwards, across the world, I think the one thing that has sort of doubled down in so many ways, and until now we keep talking about technology as just this godsend sort of blessing, or this spirit of this great human spirit which has and creativity which has created a world that would have never once been imagined, right? But technology has led to a lot of those pressures today, and simply the speed of evolution. I think that's why 80s to now, I think those are generations which are very, very close to my heart, because I was growing up, and I would say I'm an analog and digital person, right? I'm on this cusp where sometimes I want to go back into my analogness, and sometimes I want to become really digitally savvy person, right? Because there's both of that in me. There are times when I want to throw my phone away. There are times when I want to see how many people like my Insta post, right? There are these both sides of me. I think 80s onwards, and maybe 85 onwards as well, right? And there was a certain familiarity we started coming in with about technology. And if you look at the 90s kids, it's almost like a part of their growing up and their DNA, right? And that today, if you look at what you call as the millennials and now Generation Alpha, right? 2010 onwards is Generation Alpha. I think technology has become like this constant, right? And these two, I think, these two segments, I'm very, very curiously watching, because right now what we are going through, and for me now, I think this is where the attention is going to be diverted towards some real issues. And I think COVID has been the starting point of this change, because in our mortality, in our inability to know this virus for what it was creating, okay, for 2 years, we realized that we are doing something fundamentally wrong somewhere. Okay. And I think one of those outcomes was how we are looking at the environment and sustainable living as a part. And sustainability in itself is my personal interest area as well. The environment is just one point of it. There is multiple angles of sustainability, but I feel today's the new age audiences, technology is that constant, but I think everything is now going to be viewed from the lens of how sustainable is this solution? What kind of an after effect is this brand, this product, this solution creating on the communities, on the environment, right? And therefore, what am I going to participate in? And the point that you made, just Ravi, earlier, right, about is there a long-term benefit? I think that's where I see, these newer segments are now being far more vocal, right? Greta Thunberg was born at a certain time, not by chance, because this generation is going to blame us
Yeah.
for everything that's gone wrong.
Mm.
Uh, and so, yeah, the book also calls this era as a super industrialization era, which means technology is going to change things so rapidly that we're going to see society break out in different fractions. Right? There's going to be one set of people who are going to adopt technology, the Elon Musk and the Jeff Bezoses of the world, or whatever you want to call them, or the new age technology adopters, right? And then there is going to be a bunch of people who's going to just completely reject it because that's been the reason for all sorts of problems in their lives, right? Whether not enough family time or over exploitation of people, resources, everything. So I think behavior change is going to be the biggest challenge so far as sustainability is concerned, right? And I think that is something that the generation alpha, as they talk of, the 2010 born people, right? And they see it very, very differently. For them, it's a very existential question, right? So the intensity of change is that. And just to give you an example, I've been in Goa for the last couple of weeks now. Okay, I'm meeting all kinds of people, and there is a younger generation and 25-year-olds. Again, all of these are mini celebrities on the internet, right? It's not as if they're short of money, okay, but they see life very, very differently. When I was growing up, I remember going out with friends, etc. Was, oh, which hotel are we going to stay in? You know, hum kaise jayenge wahan pe? Are we flying, etc., etc. Right? There were those trappings that were more important than what was really the reason why we were coming together. These kids live in hostels, okay? And not because they can't afford hotels, but because they feel that it's more organic and a more efficient way of doing things, and also not just efficient, it's more enriching. And simultaneously, what you see is the product in itself. Hostels in my time were, you thought of them as these rooms with bunk beds with God knows what, right? I mean, something that a gray place where I don't want to get it, go to, right? These guys, you see some of the hostels that are there here in Goa, and they are cooler than any cafes I've been to.
Yeah, shared.
Right? And there's absolutely, and there is an entire microculture that exists out there, and that for them is the real value of life that they're looking to juice out. It's not the 5-star that I lived at. It's not the airport pickup that I'm so concerned about, right? I'm still traveling by bus because I think it's रात को सोना है, सुबह उठते ही गोवा पहुंच गए, क्या बुराई है यार? I mean, it's a trip in itself, right? So I think that's where a lot of resetting of things is fundamentally happening, and which is guided not just by intellect but also by its survival, right? And survival informs behavior in a very, very different way. It alters something very fundamentally. The reason why younger people are talking open marriages, no marriages, kids are not even conversation, right? It's supposed to be a natural outcome. At 8 billion, can the population support any more for how long? They're asking these questions and they're living them like reality. So, yeah, I mean, sorry, personal topic, passion area, so I can keep going. But I think this generation for me is the one to watch out for two reasons. One is professional reasons, and one is because I want to know what my daughter is up to.
And also they are going to decide whether this planet is going to survive, another, for more generations. And it's also, somewhere a thought leader was talking to me and they said that, isn't it that these people have seen whatever, so there was a whole period of restraint, middle class, Brahmanical restraint, then came, there's nothing in it. Greed is good. Go for it. Consume.
Live in the moment.
Acquire. Yes.
I want it now.
Yeah, you can have it all and all of that. And then came a moment of truth that was that really what happiness was all about? And the newer generation, because of the, what happiness, like my son is telling me, somebody has recently bought somebody in our groups of circle have bought a 10 crore house in the vicinity, and my son was least impressed, and he said, Mama, I can't imagine, they are not worried about the impact they are having. They are only worried about 8 crore house, global warming will happen, flood will happen, what will they do with this house? And I'm like thank you for being my mentor. That you keep the focus on these things. It's like, you should worry about impact. I said, what have you been listening to? Because typically we talk in, he's in class 9, but that is how these people think. This is, and thank God for that.
Alrighty. Okay, this is scary.
So this is like
But it's okay.
rapid fire. This is like literally rapid fire. All I
I'm
ask
trained
of
by my
you,
daughter.
she's just 5.
She's 3.5. Trust me,
Three and a
that's why
half.
I'm 3.5. She asked me a lot of questions already. So bring it on.
Okay. He's audiences. He's equating my questions to her 3.5-year-old daughters. Okay, I'm going to prove him wrong, but let's see how you do. Mother's best advice.
Pass.
Alternate profession could have been.
Can't think of any, seriously.
What would you do on Mars for fun?
Count the stars?
Super. As per your wife, your most often used phrase.
Please. The second one is sorry. Or would be in the reverse order.
It's what you would like to believe. I think she'd have a different answer. Never mind. A book you'd like to gift to all your friends.
The Lord of the Rings.
Ah, okay. What is your favorite childhood memory?
My first motorcycle, when I bought it, it was a very distinct memory because as a child, I don't know what age I was at, I had a distinct dream that I was riding a Royal Enfield. And when I bought it, that was my first motorcycle. I'll never forget that.
Oh,
It changed me
nice.
as a person.
Oh, okay. If you were to devote the rest of your life to philanthropy, what cause would you choose?
Planet, environment.
Okay, okay.
For
What
sure.
is
And
your
okay, so let me be specific. I'll focus on keeping temperature below. And that's the biggest cause that I would work for.
okay, okay. What is your greatest joy? I know this.
Spending time with my daughter.
Okay.
It
How would
was
you
biking at one point, but not now.
nice. How would you like strangers to remember you?
Good conversations.
Okay. What is the lesson that took you a long time to learn?
Accept my flaws.
So, what's something new happening in your life right now?
I'm in Goa. I have quit my job. I'm a freelance strategist and I'm meeting all kinds of interesting people.
Okay. What's next?
This is next.
Nice. Good.
I've been riding close to 25 years now, and I've ridden different kinds of motorcycles. The one thing that is definitely stayed with me for the longest time, and there's some things that have changed. The one thing that has stayed with me is it has exposed me to life and people, and even myself, in ways in which no amount of other forms of commute, not even a car, not even flying, nothing. I mean, it's just what it is and how it is. Because when you spend so much time sitting on a saddle for that long in your life, you cannot come out without any thoughts, okay, which alter you. Okay, so that's simply the truth, and you can ask anybody who rides a motorcycle, will tell you that. But the other part, which I think has been very, very interesting, which has unraveled to me in the last 5 years, is when I really shifted to a big motorcycle. I ride a big ADV. It's a Triumph Tiger. It's an adventure motorcycle. The idea is to take the bike into places that you think you can't take it, right? And the second fundamental thing is you should be happy to fall and ready to fall. Because when you take a bike where it's not supposed to be, it's going to fall. And it's okay if it falls. So I think when you do that, right, you start evaluating things very, very differently. And so all the romantic versions that I rode my motorcycle with for 15 years of my life or 20 years of my life went out of the window, right? And I realized that riding is physics. And if you do not understand the science and the physics behind it, you will crash. And I read this book called Twist of the Wrist,
Twist of the
which is written wrist.
Okay.
So anybody who's into biking and not even into biking, it's a great insight into human mind.
Okay.
So it's written by this guy who runs California Superbike School and practically created a factory of MotoGP champions, right? And he says, what's the first thing that happens when you think you're about to crash? Okay. The first thing that really happens is you start thinking about the crash. And when you start thinking about the crash, you start thinking about the problem. So effectively, if I am coming in too fast and I'm running out of road, my mind is thinking there is a rock and I'm going to hit that. Okay. That's exactly what will happen. But even in then that situation, if you choose to look towards where you want to go rather than where you don't want to go, your body will follow and your bike will follow. And that simply just really is a life lesson for me.
Okay. So, Anirudh, we are at wrap up. Would you like to share any online addresses, emails that audiences can reach you if they have any queries? And yeah.
Sure. I mean, you'll find me on LinkedIn. It's Anirudh Khandekar, ANIRUWDHA, KHANDEKAR. You'll see my face and you'll remember me, hopefully. You can also reach me at my name.surname@gmail.com.
Okay.
And yeah, I mean, apart from that, wherever I hope if you're in Goa, you can ping me and we can catch up. I have a lot of time on hand right now. No, absolutely. I think it was great. It was introspective for me as well. And I think in what you're doing, just Ravi, I think it's a fantastic platform, right? And talking to so many minds across, you get so many different points of view, right? And for your viewers, with such, very pointed questions, right? I would say, and rich questions with rich answers. I think it's an opportunity. It's a minefield of information that you would take. You won't find the right keywords to honestly on Google. So I think that's something fundamentally that I really like about what you're doing with this platform. And yeah, I mean, more people, merrier. There's no right, no wrong. The best part is you take all the information, distill whatever is relevant for you and works for you, and keep going. So yeah, subscribe 100%. Keep at it, because once you find something interesting, like I said, follow it up and see where it takes you.